Hello, welcome to our SILS Career Trek series on UX. Tonight we'll be discussing nuts and bolts in portfolios. I'm excited to welcome our panel of alumni to the conversation. Daniel, Katie, Lucy, Stephen, and Teresa, thank you for joining us. After the panelists introduce themselves, I'll be asking a few questions where any panelist can respond. And then we will stop recording and open it up for some additional questions from our student audience. So I will multitask and make sure to let in people in the waiting room. So Daniel, can you start us with introductions, please? And if you could include your career path.
Sure. Hello, my name is Daniel Pishak. I am a sales class of 2014 for my BSIS and 2016 for my MSIS. Currently, my career path is user experience research. Currently, I'm doing user experience research at Qualtrics, experience management platform, most people know it as a survey platform. Before that, brief time in mobile gaming, and then I started my career in library user experience. Being a UX librarian, doing library website stuff. So happy to be here, and I can just pass if you like, Lori. I'll pass to Stephen.
Hi, Stephen Levin. I am a user experience researcher, designer, and strategist. I pretty much am a generalist at this point at RTI International. I work on a variety of government contracts, doing just about everything. Sorry. Like Corgi. I started off graduating in 2016 with MSIS and went to e-commerce, then jumped to pharmaceuticals, and then spent the last 4 years at RTI doing government contracts. I'll pass it to Teresa.
Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. I am Teresa. I graduated with my MSIS in May 2020, and I started off unemployed because it was the time of the pandemic. And then I got a job with ASCOM, which is a medical devices company, doing user research. And then I am now working at Accenture Federal Services in their design studio. And I work on federal government contracts, doing UX design.
Thank you, Teresa. I will send it to Katie. Oh. Lucy, can you hear me?
Yeah. Am
Great.
I the only one can hear you, or?
I don't think so. I think I see some, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, but we will.
Okay. We're still connected?
Yes, we are still connected. So we'll still be recording.
Cool. I'll start. Hi, Laurie, and hi, everyone. I see some familiar faces. Teresa, hi. We're in the same class before. I graduated in 2018 and majored in MSIS. I started my work at 2018 too. I actually started as a UX designer. Although I had a internship at UX researcher in Nielsen Norman Group and also the BB&T Bank, but I decided to do the designer path. So I started as a contractor, as a product designer, and then worked in Walmart and ServiceNow for 1 year, and now I'm at a startup called LogDNA, located in San Francisco. It's a DevOps developer tool. Yeah, that's about me.
Great, thank you. And Katie, can you introduce yourself and your career path, please?
Yep, sure thing. Hi all, I'm Katie. I'm BSIS 2016. I've been at CapTech Consulting ever since. I've started off as a BA, but I've switched over to a UX architect / digital strategist. So I do a little bit of research, a little bit of design, I do a little bit of everything. So
Great. Thank you very much. So in surveying our students, the number one question people had focused on portfolios. So what to include, how to incorporate class projects, if you could develop your own case studies, should you pay to attend a portfolio workshop? So if everyone who would like to answer this question could just let me know, do you have a portfolio? And if so, what's included? And when you're looking at people who are coming into the field, what do they have included in their portfolio as well?
Who wants to start?
Sure, Stephen, you can go first.
No, please.
Okay. Okay, cool. I just have one follow-up question. These are students who are looking for a designer type job, or they're looking for a researcher? Yeah.
Great question. We have both. So we have, if you could answer to both parts, that would be great.
I started as a UX researcher. I didn't have a portfolio, but I started to collect my portfolio after I graduated. Although it seems like already late, but I still catch the train. That means it's possible if you're really trying to try hard on your portfolio, you will collect a good amount of portfolio. So three very important thing I want to say is, one is try to work with a real client, because real world is very different than what you're trying to make up in the case study. Even try to visit a local coffee shop, or just offer them, you will do a website for them. Even that will help. And very practical hands-on design experience is going to be very useful for you. And second thing I would say, include all the iterations, your crappy iterations that you think in the portfolio. It is very important, because you are able to see what is the reason you failed on there, and how can you be improved better in the later. So the third point, the most important thing is how you measure. In the beginning, set up your goal of where you want to achieve, and measure, like how do you want to measure it, and how do you know it's going to be wrong or right. That is the three things that nowadays people look at in your portfolio. Yeah.
I can speak to the research side of house. I'm seeing a lot of portfolios come in with like affinity maps, or from workshops, or just kind of walking through their overall research approach. So we're starting to see more portfolios both on that product design side, as well as the user experience research side. And it's kind of just laying out what your methodology was from a testing perspective, and kind of laying out, and then kind of pulling some of those deliverables into that portfolio to share. I think my biggest advice is treat it like your resume. Make sure things are spelled correctly. This is ultimately this deliverable. If you are trying to go into the design field, right, and you have a website that doesn't kind of speak to that, make sure that your deliverables aren't really nice and your website's really crappy. Kind of make sure that they're equal to each other, because that definitely does detract. So,
Daniel, what do you have to add?
Yeah, just what Katie was saying reminded me. I also speak to the research side. I had design stuff in my portfolio way back when I was a college student, but then I quickly went to design, research, and stuck with research. And I agree with what Katie was saying, and what Lucy was saying as well, about like putting in your method and your process, like even the early stuff in your process, even if it's something that didn't work out so well, just including all of that. Something that I've done in my own portfolio as of the last maybe year and a half is try to tell the story of where I fit in with the team and the team dynamics, like who worked on this with you, even if it's a class project, you could all be students together, but maybe one of you had more of a set, this person did like the coding for our project and I did the design stuff and this person did the research, and how your work helped the team achieve its goals. So when I talk about my research projects, I'm like, there's one thing on my portfolio where I talk about there's a feature owner at my organization who didn't believe in user research. So I did this project. He was really surprised at the insights, and now that feature owner loves user research. And that was like a case study of like, not just me doing the methods right, but also it's useful for the company that I worked for at the time. So I think that's really important. At least I found it to be really important. I feel like it's helped me in my job career growth stuff is like, so you do the methods correctly, that's important. And also like surrounding those methods is like, how did you get to those methods? And then how did you report the findings? That's all about team dynamic stuff. So I would include that if you're doing research portfolios. Katie has her hand up. We can go to her.
I was going to say that's a great point. I think one of the things that I see when I'm reviewing portfolios that frustrates me is the use of the word team throughout. So I think it's great to highlight you're working on a team, but make sure you call out your individual contributions and impact, because that's what we're looking for ultimately when we're going through and looking through portfolios, or if you're sharing out portfolios. But also calling out team dynamics is also great to see that, you can work with the team and kind of make sure and get feedback, because ultimately that's what you're going to have to do in the real world.
So on to even another layer from portfolios. That's really good information about what to include. I've always heard that you don't have to necessarily build your portfolio from scratch. And so it's more a testament to the content versus how it's built. Obviously, as we were saying, you want to make sure it's working. But do you see that there is between potentially researchers and designers that some are creating the portfolio from scratch, or is no one doing that?
Are we talking in terms of like using WordPress or something like this, or just making
Yes.
nothing? Oh,
Right.
Okay. I speak first because like this is something I used to do before COVID. I used to go to Panera Bread on Fridays and work on my portfolio. It's not a joke. That was my Friday night routine for a while, and I enjoyed it. Because just what else am I going to do on a Friday night but think about my career? Things have changed. I have a life now. But anyway, I've made my portfolios from scratch, just HTML, CSS, put it all up myself, and paid for hosting, all those things. And there was some sense of pride, but that is it. Like that, all I get is a sense of I did that. Now I just pay the professional, like whatever the lowest tier of paying for WordPress is, like WordPress.com, because it takes away the work of having to do all that coding and writing and why isn't my JavaScript working, all this stuff. And at least for the research side, if you're a designer, it might be different, although maybe not. You could seriously just use like a Google Doc or a Google spreadsheet for your portfolio. As long as it's at a link that someone could get to, put it on your resume at a bit.ly link you make if you don't want to pay for web hosting or something like that. I think it's going to be about that content and the story that you tell. You can do that with a Google Doc if you organize it properly. At least for research. On design, it might be harder because it's harder to copy and paste certain things into a Google Doc or a slide deck. But yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah, I think the easier you can be on yourself as you're putting together your portfolio. And I think, you want it to be it's your digital representation of yourself. So you want it to look nice. So if you don't know the HTML and CSS to get you there, then, WordPress all the way, or whatever other tool you want to use. So.
Great. Lucy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, similar that although I have so many coding classes, like I took Dr. Kepra's PHP advanced, but I wouldn't code myself. Like there is so much dynamic and so much work that will roll your energy into the things that people are not looking at. So I would say use a template, just normal template, even link to Google Slides will be super helpful. The most important thing is what's in your case study. It's not how it look like. So.
Yeah, I mean, mine's a Squarespace. I pay $50. It, I got to just point and click, make a design. It looks good enough for me. It has everything I need to link in, and I'm just going to link to it because I'm narcissist, and you asked me to be on this panel. It's my first name, last name at ux.com, so that it's an easy thing to put on my resume. It's literally easy to remember, and it shows off my work. But I mean, as Lucy said, it's about what's in it more than how you make it. Or I guess everyone's kind of said that. It literally can be anything as long as it's you. It shows your work. I care very little as long as as Katie says, as long as it's not misspelled, like it's fine.
Thank you very much. Teresa, you had your hand up too.
Yeah, I definitely +1 to what everyone said, but I think like at the end of the day, when you're thinking about how you're coming off to like the other people who are looking at your resume and your portfolio, you're not saying I am someone who's a software engineer. You're not saying I do front end development. You're saying I am a UX researcher. I am a UX designer. So like, if you don't have free time like Daniel, I was also there at one point coding my own website. Like, don't spend your time doing it. Spend your time making sure that you explain your user research questions while you make sure that your methodology is like up to par. You talk about how you work in feedback in your iterations. I would not worry about coding. Like Google also has free like websites you can host on. I host mine on Wix. I've been using it for like 5 years. So don't worry about the effort. Put that energy somewhere else.
It's so important to hear that from people who are in the field. If I say that, it doesn't come across as, are you sure? Are you sure? So it's great to hear that from everyone. Thank you. Any other portfolio comments before we move into some other topics? I think we've covered a lot of good information. So our next question is, when you have this wonderful portfolio and you have things to share, what are some ways that you found in interviewing with employers that you could spin up your SILS background into what is necessary in the UX role that you were trying to be hired into, or create your story to share? So I understand the visual representation in the portfolio, but how did you verbally do that?
Who wants to? I'll go first. So I essentially just made it part of my general story. I bounced between jobs, between very customer centric and very technology centric, and discovered the field of UX and wanted to stay on the research side of things. So I decided to go get my master's in information science with an emphasis on user experience research and design. And that is how, that's essentially my pitch on that. And then all the experience I gained after that is just that, when I didn't have any work experience after that, I talked about some of the things I did in there, one or two of the projects that I helped on. But it's just adding it to the narration.
Just going off of that, from an undergrad perspective, like Berquist's like 101, like what is information? That's all a website is, all an app is just the display of information and organizing that information. And you're spending your time at UNC studying that, right? So when you get into information architecture, you're literally an expert on taxonomies and organizations, and forget all of the key terminology. But I still have the practices that I would apply. And so I think just kind of selling that, taking, like, I think there were some, UX specific classes and some like BA specific classics, and just learning those class projects can be very applicable to, especially for the ones I know the ones I had, they were real world scenarios. And so taking those, and we were developing wireframes, so you could throw that up into a proposal and lay out that methodology. and things like that. And then also just speaking through feedback. Again, I think that's critical. I think we're in a very team-oriented culture these days. And so getting feedback and applying that feedback and working with teammates, especially from like that behavioral interviewing perspective. And then just like I said, really just speaking to, you get information at this point. So.
Yeah. So as a designer, I'll say, actually, be honestly, our curriculum is really not very design focused. So I tried to branching out a lot, taking a bunch of design classes in visual communication school. Dr. Laura, she had a few really good classes that helps me too, but also I feel like from SILS, there are one class that I take with Dr. Yeah, and I'm a bad student. Yeah, don't quote me on that. But it's called information information organization. It's actually, I think, is the most useful class, I feel, to me, because nowadays, like with my day-to-day job, I use that methodology every day to categorize information and try to differentiate different components and back up my conversation. So that really helps me a lot. With that, I think if you want to be a designer, you can use a lot of our learned terminology and background, like research, to back up your design solutions. I think that's super helpful to me. Yeah.
That's the other cool thing about SILS is you have some UX classes, right? And then you have your like your information organization classes, and then you have your like development engineering classes. And so I think that's also one of the strong skill sets that SILS students bring is they've all taken some kind of coding class at some point. So they have like that basic understanding of not only what that UI, how users might interact with that UI, but also they're able to kind of translate it for the developers in the background and make sure that, hey, I'm not going to suggest this outlandish interaction, but I know that developers are going to be like, no, like that's going to take a year to build. Like I'm not doing that. And so you're able to kind of speak both languages. And I think that's something really unique to SILS.
Yeah, we're seeing some comments in the chat that agree with that. Thank you, Daniel, for adding that in. Katie, I think that's a great point of, making sure you have that combination of things. So when you were first on the job market, and we know that it's hard to find entry-level UX roles, how much were you talking about classes in interviews or course projects in interviews, or how much was it that you were talking about maybe independent projects that you've added to your portfolio?
It was a while ago, but I was finishing up my BSIS degree, and multiple paths in front of me: go get the master's degree, go get a career option. So it was a while back, but I remember interviewing for a design studio job right before I graduated with my bachelor's. And pretty much the whole interview I went to was all about talking about my class project. It was part of the portfolio I had sent them in the application. And I actually had remarked that this particular organization took the class project really seriously. This was like a project we did. One of a PhD student, Javier, forget his last name, taught it, a user experience design class a long time ago. And the project I did in his class, we talked about at length. I remember noting, wow, these people are really taking it seriously, and they're, I'm a designer. I worked on this in my class project, and they're kind of giving me that kind of respect. This is real work. And I think that that might be even like, even though I didn't take that job, I went to get my master's and it was great. It would have been a good job because I think them showing that kind of respect to you as a student is really important. If someone thinks your class projects are like, well, this wasn't real, is that the kind of organization you want to be working for? If they don't see you as a professional in your own right, you have a bachelor, by the time you finish your degree, you will have a college education or master's, whatever you're doing with SILS. So I think that's part, it's totally fine to include it in your portfolio, totally fine to discuss it in interviews. And of course, there are limitations to class projects, but if that's what you have available, that's all you have available, I would think a reputable employer would respect that this is work you've done in a professional setting, even if it's in a classroom.
Yeah, that reminds me. I took a class called data visualization with. That was really helpful for me when I tried to. I already got the role, but they are not sure like which department I should work for. Then I showed a few of my projects. That was one of the things I did in data visualization. So I got opportunity to work with a bunch of dashboard projects that I really like. Yeah, I think that was helpful. Also, as when I first started to find an internship as a UX researcher, we had a usability testing classes with Dr. Capra, and also that was I think it's my proposal was with VR research, and then I got another another internship opportunity. So I think class project is also important to help you get into the door for the very good basic foundations.
Along with that, for students who aren't graduating in just a few months and might be watching this over the next year or so, what were some things, or what would you recommend for people to be involved in from a professional development point of view, in addition to their doing well in their courses and developing their portfolio? What are some other suggestions you might have to help them?
And ultimately, I think it depends where you are in your education journey as well as in your career path, right? If you're coming right out from undergrad, well-rounded team involvement, I think I feel like the interviews I had were mostly behavioral at that point. They'd already seen the resume, they'd already, knew what I was capable of. I also don't have a traditional UX recruiting background. I actually was recruited as a BA and then switched to UX in my path there. So I didn't have a portfolio, still working on mine. But I think to that point, just kind of, team involvement, leadership, you can pull from your SILS classes. But those, I think, from a behavioral perspective, speak volumes.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about for international students. I know we might have some international students. I would say later on, if you work 2 or 3 years, your skill set, your technical side might not be that much different compared to other colleagues. What most differentiates you is your collaboration skill, communication skill, and your leadership skill. So do not think like you don't need to study leadership or communication. That's equally super important. Yeah, that's I would say. Yeah.
I know we have, oh, Teresa, did you want to add?
Just a small bit. I think while I was still in school, a way to kind of reach out to people that wasn't necessarily like asking people for the jobs was we went to UX Y'all conference, which is local to North Carolina. There's obviously lots of local UX people there where you can just like talk to them and get their business card and ask them questions about like, what does UX look like for your company? Not necessarily like jobs, unless you're at that point. But I think if Slack is still a thing, there's tons of Slack groups, UX resources, and also a lot of people like do user research on there as well too. So I think that is another like avenue where you can get to know people and kind of network from there.
Yeah,
me and
we
Steven are on the same page on the chat about Triangle UXPA. Really active when I was there, and I hope it still is. I always enjoyed it.
Yeah, I would say that it's still active. I know with the pandemic, things have shifted in terms of virtual and in person, but I know there's been a couple virtual UX Y'all conferences that are still ongoing. So there definitely is that connection for SILS students to have a way locally to get involved with UX professionals in the field. So I second Stephen's suggestion, joining at the student rate. That's, I try not to encourage too many pay options in career development, but that is one that could be really helpful for people.
Also, I want to add to that. I know we're during the pandemic, there is a website called ADP List. That's a bunch of adplist.org. I find this later on after I graduate. They found it a while ago, but they have some really great mentors from all the companies like Microsoft, Google. You can look for, and yeah, I think book them early because the slots are going really fast. Yeah.
Thanks, Lucy. Can you throw that in the chat for us so we have it for our session? Thank you. Great. Well, that was all of our questions that we wanted to make sure to cover to hit as many of the concerns students had when they were filling out the poll on being interested in UX and how to get into the field. So I'm going to pause recording and I'm going to ask if anyone either wants to put something in the chat or unmic and talk. We would love to open it up. We have some time for further questions. So I want to just say on record, since we're going to stop recording, thank you very much to our panelists, but we're not quite done yet.